So thanks everyone for hopping in and joining this chat. I wanted to talk a little bit today about the R Validation Hub. We are, I think, a recurring act here at the R Pharma conference, having grown out of R Pharma initially. And this year I want to talk about what's been a pretty monumental year for the R Validation Hub. So we're going to talk about some reflection we've been doing throughout the year, and more specifically, some plans that we have for the year ahead. And so I'll be presenting. I'm Doug Kelkhoff. I chair the R Validation Hub, but there's really a village that makes the R Validation Hub happen. So I'm really just here representing the team on behalf of everyone who's involved. So who are we? If you haven't heard of us, the R Validation Hub is a collaborative project supporting the adoption of R within the biopharmaceutical regulatory setting. We have a webpage that you're welcome to check out. Like I mentioned, we grew out of R Pharma 2018, and we have participants that contribute to our executive team across about 10 organizations, which fluctuates around that number as people come and go in their commitments. We have frequent involvement with health authorities to keep us kind of grounded in what the needs are. And there's probably, at this point, probably well beyond 60 participating organizations that are either monitoring our mailing list, reaching out in individual work streams, or directly involved. So we have quite a reach, and we're really proud that that keeps growing. Before I jump into what we have been up to, I want to talk a little bit about what our affiliations are. So we are supported by the R Consortium, and the R Consortium provides support to the R Foundation and to key organizations to maintain, distribute, and use our software. We, of course, are one of those, and there's plenty of others that we're in close contact with that are also supported by the R Consortium. And these include the R Submissions Working Group, the R Medicine Conference, R Hub Initiative, and the R Repositories Working Group. So there's a lot of great overlap there, and we're able to leverage some really wonderful expertise through the R Consortium. Beyond just the working groups, the R Consortium also supports a number of initiatives that help to encourage adoption of the R language. So this includes the R Ladies Network, Latin R, the R Medicine Conference mentioned earlier, and the Use R conferences and meetups. And this amounts to a pretty substantial amount of funding that goes out to these different organizations, helping to organize really large-scale collaborative projects, really encouraging interdisciplinary forums, direct support for key events, which includes R Pharma, and direct worldwide support for our user groups. So the reason I'm mentioning all this is because we directly benefit from organizations that join the R Consortium. So if you like what you're hearing about what we're up to, please consider getting involved. It's a great initiative that kind of keeps the inner cogs of the R world moving along. So to move on and talk a little bit more about the R Validation Hub and what we do, like I mentioned, we have a website where you can learn all the details about everything that we're up to, but I want to summarize these in about 6 categories real briefly. We have a white paper that we put out quite a number of years back that was kind of a statement of how we saw R being realistically used within a regulatory setting. And to this day, this white paper is still predominantly held up as the gold standard for how companies should be embracing R to manage the use of R software for regulatory submissions. Likewise, we have a number of initiatives that support that process and try to make it as easy as possible. Kind of going counterclockwise, I want to talk first about Risk Metric in the bottom left, led by Eric Milliman. And so this is a package that we have to gather and report on heuristics of our packages, a way of trying to determine rough measures of their package quality. We have Risk Assessment, which is a Shiny interface for supporting this process, led by Aaron Clark and Jeff Thompson. We have Risk Score, which is the output of Risk Metric, cataloged against all of CRAN, trying to collect metrics that then can be more immediately used, and also led by Aaron Clark. We have our communications workstream, which really is the core engine behind all of our external-facing communications. That is contributed to by Jackson, Anuja, and Antal. And then our most recent working group is the repositories working group, where we're starting to think about how we could start doing all of this as a public service so that this isn't something that individual companies need to spin up themselves. Cool. And I just saw Mike Smith posted more information about the R consortium, so check that out if you are interested. Moving on to what the last year has looked like for us. We've been reflecting a lot on our tools and the needs that they are filling for our users. And so one of the things that's really been kind of a focal point for this is risk metric as a package. And what we're starting to realize is that the industry has changed a lot in the last few years since we started developing this. The initial needs that we set out to achieve for the betterment of the industry have been kind of surpassed by what the package actually offers or was intended to offer. And so I want to kind of frame this in terms of like what the initial needs are of what we set out to do and how things are going now. So when we started building Riskmetric, we really wanted a tool that supported largely the advocacy of the use of R. We wanted tools for individual analysts or statisticians to be able to kind of do a quick cursory self-assessment of a package and use that as justification when they're going to an IT or system administrator peer to champion the use of R and show that we can start qualifying these packages or quantifying the characteristics of these packages. We really wanted a simple system, and that kind of involved trying to do the right thing out of the box, or at least guessing what the right thing would be. And we wanted to primarily support this user story where data scientists wanted to build a case for what good software could look like. And I think largely that goal was met. There was a lot of early adoption, and I think it really got people thinking about what these qualities should start looking like. Fast forward to today, and I think the argument for why use R has really been established. And now we're in this position where people do want to use R and they want to use Riskmetric, but there's kind of this contradiction in the way that the goals that we set out with and the goals that people want are not really aligning. So things are now at the stage where people want to use this tool as a tool to support administration of R packages. And that was kind of a stretch goal of ours initially, but certainly not the leading goal. People really want precise indicators of quality. They don't necessarily, in fact, they're willing to pay a little bit of a price in terms of the simplicity if it means that you can be really rigid and locked down about the way that you get these indicators of quality. And our primary user story is now with the goal of building a production grade R environment. And there are companies that are using it for these purposes. It's just not as pleasant as we really want it to be. You really kind of have to safeguard against some of these more flexible behaviors to really kind of lock it down and make it much more reproducible. So I want to kind of walk through this small history of what these features look like over time. We started out quantifying R packages in Riskmetric. We had a Shiny app. We wanted to serve repos, and that was all well and good. Then we started pursuing this goal of scoring R packages in Riskmetric, customizing package scoring criteria and risk assessment, and customizing package filters in our regulatory repos working group. And these are all starting to kind of like add more user-facing behaviors on top of these that kind of grow beyond their initial scope. And today we have Riskmetric being perceived often as the industry standard, despite the fact that it's meant to be kind of this fluid user-facing tool. We have risk assessment now doing report generation as well as the repos project. So there's some overlapping goals. There's some scope creep in terms of how the packages have evolved. And we have been taking this year to really reflect on how we want to address these growing needs of these packages. So just to kind of summarize the themes here, we have each team pushing forward in new directions, and that's great. We want people enthusiastic and excited and building out new features with all these different products. We're recognizing commonality across each of these work streams, and that puts tension between the groups, and we wanted to ease that tension by working together. We're exposing new opportunities for dedicated teams to kind of fulfill this unified vision. So to put this a little more graphically, we have these three different projects: Riskmetric, risk assessment, and our regulatory repositories, which doesn't have a hex sticker, so it gets a little placeholder. And each of them has now grown to have these additional goals in mind. So I tried to represent kind of governance as this little gavel, or decision making as this little flow chart, and reporting as this little paper leaflet. And so each of these is kind of trying to tackle these additional capabilities in their own little realm of our ecosystem, when it would make so much more sense to split those off and have dedicated teams for each of these. And so what we're hoping to do is to reorganize ourselves to be much more intentional about these shared capabilities, so that governance, the industry scoring and recommendations, the involving more directly more regulatory expertise, that can all happen in one place, where it isn't the role of our package developers to try to be having decisions that are really much more about the industry. And so we can kind of like recruit people, hopefully, that are more engaged directly with regulators, their internal validation leads, and they can start helping us really shape what the governance of risk decision making should look like. We want the tools for the tools for decision making to also be something that's more unified. So we want a simple and more consistent syntax for specifying these things. We want it to be easily interpretable by regulators. So ideally, what this would look like is that there's a clear way of articulating how you have defined risk. And when you do submit some analysis to a regulator, they can infer what you meant by that. And you can have a discussion around whether or not that's an appropriate way of assessing risk, that is in a way that doesn't require, spinning up your own in-house kind of solution. Likewise, we have a few work streams now that are pursuing reporting, and we want that to be more consistent, and just make that a shared resource across all of our teams. So if that caught your interest, I want to invite you to participate in our upcoming Risk Tools Developer Day happening on November 1st. It'll be a workshop hosted as part of our Pharma later in the week. And I will be opening the floor to engage with the community to hear about what you think the breakdown of these different tools should be. And that will really set the wheels in motion for us to start thinking a lot more intentionally about what we see as the future of our tools landscape. So thank you for listening to hear a brief glimpse of where the R Validation Hub is at and where we intend to go. And I'll leave it with a thank you, and we look forward to hearing more from you at our Developer Day.